Hey everybody, we are picking up today and talking about the Mughal Empire. So again, three famous rulers that you should know are Babur, Akbar, and Aurangzeb. All right. So, growth of the Mughal Empire. Let's take a look at this beautiful map that we have here. Notice where it starts, and they actually lose quite a bit of the original territory over time, but that's okay because Babur's grandson, Akbar, adds all of this. Woohoo! By 1605. And Aurangzeb adds the remaining. And this is the most united that the Indian subcontinent has been, if you guys can flash back, since the Mauryan Empire. And that was pre Gupta, because the Gupta is even smaller. The Delhi Sultanate doesn't unite India to this extent either. So, pretty impressive, all in under 200 years. All right, political foundations. Mughal India was going to be a rising empire in the 16th century. And despite how large they get, the largest empire within this time period is actually going to be Ming China. The Mughal Empire was established and consolidated by the Turkic warrior Babur. He lived from 1483 to 1530, and his grandson Akbar, who reigned from 1556 to 1605. Akbar established a central administration and granted non-hereditary land revenues to his military officers and government officials. Akbar and his successors gave efficient administration and peace to the prosperous northern heartland. Foreign trade boomed, but the Mughals, like the Safavids, did not maintain a navy or merchant marine. They preferred to allow Europeans to serve as carriers. Emperor Akbar is considered the greatest leader of the Mughal dynasty. In order to profit from Indian Ocean trade, the Mughal licensed imperial mints. 90% of Mughal taxes came from agriculture. And the Mughals encouraged trade by building roads and encouraging new settlements. Previous to the Mughals, local aristocracy used to collect and keep taxes, but Mughals had to find a way to incorporate local authorities into their government. Akbar was an incredibly tolerant ruler of other religions. And part of why that is Mughal India had a majority Hindu population. The Mughals inherited traditions of religious tolerance from earlier Muslim rulers, both inside and outside of India. Much like the Ottomans, incredibly tolerant. And one of the problems that they had to face was that they themselves are Muslim rulers, their subjects are Hindu. And Indians were used to focusing on their own caste group and thus viewed the Mughals as another caste with their own interests. And one of the ways that religious tolerance can be seen, an example, is 15% of Mughal officials that were holding land revenues were Hindus, and most of them were from the northern region of a warrior family. Akbar, again, very tolerant, was the most illustrious of Mughal rulers. He took the throne at age 13 and commanded the government on his own at 20. He worked for reconciliation between Hindus and Muslims, and one thing he did is he actually married a Hindu princess from the northern region, and he introduced reforms that reduced taxation and legal discrimination against Hindus. Akbar made himself the center of a short-lived, eclectic new religion called the Divine Faith. And he sponsored a court culture in which Hindu and Muslim elements were mixed. And one thing he actually did is in creating a council which everybody sat around a round stage, he actually built a platform above this stage, and he would walk around it so everybody could see him walking above them. And this was actually woven into his short-lived divine faith, but this is also where the phrase Allahu Akbar comes from. Translated, Allahu Akbar actually has two different meanings. One of them is God is great, but the other one also translates to God is Akbar. Aurangzeb was the sixth, and he's actually considered the last effective Mughal emperor. He reigns from 49 years until 1658. Pardon me. He reigns for 49 years from 1658 until his death in 1707. While he rules, he does he does some things that many historians consider to be a bit questionable, and that even though he is very powerful, that some of the stuff he does leads to the downfall. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. He was a very notable expansionist, as you saw on the map. During his reign, the Mughal emperor temporarily reached its greatest extent. During his lifetime, victories in the south expanded the Mughal Empire to have a population of between 100 to 150 million subjects. And again, that's kind of a wide gap of what it could be. That's 50 million people that may or may not have actually existed, but there was no census, so this is the best we can do. Aurangzeb's policies partly abandoned the legacy of religious pluralism, which remained a very controversial aspect to his reign. And because he abandoned this is what starts a trend that leads to the downfall of the Mughal Empire. Rebellions and wars led to the exhaustion of the imperial Mughal treasury and army. He was a very strong handed, authoritarian ruler. Following his death, the expansionary period of the Mughal Empire came to an end. The empire then began to decline after his death in 1707. Factors contributing to this decline include the land grant system, the failure to completely integrate Aurangzeb's newly conquered territory into the imperial administration, and the rise of regional powers. The real power of the Mughal rulers came to an end in 1739 after Nadir Shah raided Delhi. The empire survived in name only until 1858, when the European powers take over, most notably England. As the Mughal government lost power, officials bearing the title of Nawab established their own more or less independent states. These regional states were prosperous, but they could not effectively prevent the intrusion of Europeans, such as the French, whose representative captured the English trading center of Madras and became a power broker until he was later recalled to France in 1754. So now we're going to completely switch gears. What I want to show you here, we've got the peacock throne. And this was a symbol of Mughal power. And we're talking about European powers taking over. This throne is made of gold. Those peacocks are made of precious gems. And every single design that you see on here is made of precious gems. When European powers take over, this throne mysteriously disappears. A replica was made, but when you take the actual physical symbol of Mughal power, it's kind of hard to come back from that. Unfortunately, this has never been found, so it's widely believed that after it was taken, it was melted down. Switching gears totally, and talking about the Russian Empire. So, two people we'll be discussing include Ivan the Terrible and Peter the Great. So, take a look at the Russian Empire. We've got Russia in 1533, and then slowly going on, added by 1721. But then look here, added by 1796, we have this region, and then going back up through here. So, origins of the Russian Empire. Following the dissolution of Mongol power in Russia, the Golden Horde guys, the city of Moscow became the foundation for a new state, which would be called Muscovy. And this absorbed the territory of the former Kievan state and Novgorod in the west, and conquered the Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan. The Muscovite ruler Ivan IV took the title of Tsar in 1547, and Ivan IV would reign from 1533 to 1584. He further centralized royal authority and extended Russian power to the west, east, and south. Random cruel acts in his later reign earned him the name Ivan the Terrible, and a great example of some of these random cruel acts, if you will, is his son and actually designated heir was murdered by him because Ivan called his son's wife, basically he called her a hooker. And his son was like, you really can't do that. That's my wife. She is going to be the leader of Russia by my side. So Ivan took his gold-handled cane and whapped his son in the head with it so hard that he actually fractured his skull and his son died 3 days later. Ivan realized what he had done, the horror of what he had done, only after he did it. Yeah, that's just one of the many examples that I could give you of Ivan the Fourth. The natural direction for Russian expansion was east. Expansion in Siberia was led by armed adventurers who defeated the only political power in the region, the Khanate of Sibir. And they took the land from small hunting and fishing groups of native people. Siberia was valued first for its furs and timber, and then as a penal colony for prisoners, which will actually happen again and again. Stalin will set up the gulags in Siberia. And partly it's because of the temperature and other conditions, is why this is what rulers view as a great location for prisons. In the 1650s, the expanding Russian Empire met the expanding Qing Empire in Mongolia, Central Asia, and along the Amur. A treaty between the two powers in 1689 recognized Russian claims west of Mongolia. After the death of Ivan IV, Russia entered times of troubles. And one of the only sources of revenue, and this became the main source of state revenue, was from agricultural surpluses, but there's not a lot of trade going on. The country is behind other European and Asian nations, but one man will fix that by himself, single handedly. We'll talk about him in just a minute. As the empire expanded, it incorporated a diverse set of peoples, cultures, and religions, and this often produced internal tensions. One group of people are called the Cossacks, and they belong to a close knit band. They made temporary alliances with whoever could pay for their military services. So essentially, they are soldiers for hire. They are mercenaries, and they are very skilled at what they do. Despite the fact that the Cossacks often performed important services for the Russian Empire, they managed to maintain a high degree of autonomy. Threats and invasions by Sweden and Poland, and internal disputes among the Russian aristocracy, who were called the boyars, in the 17th century, led to the overthrow of the old line of Muscovite rulers and the enthronement of a new ruler named Mikhail Romanov in 1613. The Romanov rulers combined consolidation of their authority with territorial expansion to the east. And as the power of the Romanov rose, the freedom of Russian peasants fell. In 1649, Russian peasants were legally transformed into serfs. I want you guys to think about that for a minute. While the rest of the world has completely let go of the feudal system and serfdom, or they are very close to doing so, Russia is just starting to use it. Peter the Great. Let's talk about him. Peter the Great has earned that name. He reigned from 1689 to 1725. He fought the Ottomans in an attempt to gain a warm water port on the Black Sea and to liberate Constantinople from the Ottoman rule. But he didn't actually achieve either goal. Peter was more successful in the Great Northern War, in which he broke Swedish control over the Baltic and established direct contacts between Russia and Europe. Following his victory in the Great Northern War, Peter built a new capital, St. Petersburg. I mean, why not name it after yourself? Which was to contribute the westernization of Russian elites and demonstrate to Europeans the sophistication of Russia. The new capital was also intended to help break the power of boyars by reducing their traditional roles in the government and in the army. Peter wanted to use European technology and culture to strengthen Russia and to strengthen the autocratic power of his government. He really wasn't interested in political liberalization. As an autocratic ruler, Peter brought the Russian Orthodox Church under his control. He built industrial plants to serve the military and increased the burden of taxes and labors on the serfs, whom the Russian Empire depended on for the production of basic foodstuffs. Now, I want to talk to you for a minute about exactly how he earned that name, the Great. So in terms of bringing in industrial plants and that technology, Peter actually went undercover for years. He went undercover as a blacksmith. He joined a foreign navy to gain the knowledge of shipbuilding and of weapons. He did this a number of times to bring this information back to Russia and then to use it to modernize his country. That being said, though, this did come at a cost. It increased the burden on the serfs, which years down the road you're going to have an uprising of the lower classes, because the serf system, this feudal system, doesn't actually come to an end until the late 1800s, and then completely comes to an end. And this is an argument that can be made. You actually do have a ruler. We'll talk about him, Alex, who tries to end the feudal system, is mostly successful, but then is assassinated before he can truly see it through. And this is part of the downfall of the Romanov family and their execution. But we'll get more into that later. All right. Our last slide for today are the Jewish and Armenian diasporas. And I did mention this earlier when discussing the Ottoman borders. Jews face persistent prejudice quite often in every empire that they lived in. Even though Jewish and Christian peoples were accepted by the Ottomans, Jews face persistent prejudice in Ottoman lands, despite their contributions to the intellectual and commercial life. And you'll find a large branch of Jewish diaspora throughout the Russian Empire as well, because the religion in Russia is the Russian Orthodox Church. In addition, the Armenians, who follow the ancient Orthodox Christian Church, live throughout Eurasia, and that includes Russian and Ottoman lands, and they're also constantly facing prejudice. This is where you have multiple diasporas coming from. We'll also talk about one of the final Armenian diasporas, which also led to the Armenian genocide, but we'll hit that in Unit 6. All right, we're going to stop there for today. Email me with those questions, and if you have any concerns, you know who to contact. Have a great night, guys. Cheers.